This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at Mubi.com/Karsten.
Hey buddy, welcome back to What I Watched This Month, January edition. I have a bit of a cold, so I might sound a little nasally, but the people need to know what I watched this month. It's the most important thing in the world, so let's just power through it. I started the year with This Place Rules, directed by Andrew Callahan. Much has happened since the day I watched this documentary, specifically the sexual misconduct allegations that came out about Callahan. I do not really have much to add to that, other than it is just a very unfortunate situation, and I believe the victims, obviously, and I just, it sucks. As for the documentary itself, separating it from what happened, I thought it was pretty good. I think his form of journalism has felt very fresh and interesting compared to the kinds of journalism we're used to in America. Felt like a raw, moving, and oftentimes funny look at the country we live in, and This Place Rules does deliver with those same traits we're used to from his work. I don't think he really expands on his style in the way I was hoping he would with this kind of larger canvas that he was given. The editing could have been turned up a notch, and if anything, could have used another run in the editing room. But as far as journalism goes, it still feels like a breath of fresh air for its take on the subject matter. I just wish someone else was making it and not this guy. Then I watched Babylon. Call me crazy, but I loved this. It feels less like a movie about the magic of Hollywood and more about just Hollywood, period. Which is also how I saw La La Land, just in a less obvious way. I've never seen a movie that is so blunt and over the top about how easily this industry swallows people whole and then spits them back out. It's mesmerizing and also kind of disturbing, and I think that last montage is really haunting. Chazelle clearly has such a love-hate relationship with this town and industry and with the art form itself, and it feels like you see that on full display in Babylon. It's both beautiful and kind of awful. Is it messy? Yes. Is it too long? Definitely. There were definitely a few scenes in here that could have been cut and not made a difference. But to watch someone throw their entire selves into a film is both life-affirming and also refreshing, especially in today's film industry. Also, that score, are you kidding me? There's a lot more to be said about this. I think it's pretty brilliant if you're looking at it in like a meta way. If you don't like it, though, I can't blame you. Then I watched Strange World. This is one of the most forgettable movies I think I've ever seen. I forgot about it, like, I'm not exaggerating, minutes after it was over, which is usually harmless as long as a movie is keeping me entertained during the runtime. Who really cares what happens after the fact? But this movie really felt like a complete waste of time. Why does it exist? The animation is sometimes nice to look at. That's the best thing I can say about it. I've been saying this a lot lately, but this, more than anything else out there, feels like a fake movie. Then I watched Megan. Already did a video on this, so I won't say too much, but I had a great time and thought this was a very fun movie. It did exactly what it came here to do, and that's all I needed from it. Then I watched Tokyo Drifter. As a fan of Seijun Suzuki's Branded to Kill, my expectations for this were pretty high, and unsurprisingly, it did deliver. This has about the same issues I had with Branded. The editing and writing was often so fast-paced and jumbled that I found it to be sort of disorienting and hard to follow. Very few films have come close to being as colorful and as playful with their look as this does. Truly a one-of-a-kind experience, just from that perspective. Even if some of it was hard to follow at times, it did just enough to where it's like I wasn't completely lost. So honestly, I just ended up having a fun time with this, and I do recommend checking it out. Then I watched Magic Mike XXL. I wasn't the biggest fan of the first Magic Mike, mostly because I found it to be surprisingly dull for what it was about. And this here is just the complete opposite. What a straight up heartwarming experience this was. I felt like I was part of the squad. This has to be up there with Paddington 2 when it comes to the wholesome sequels that make you want to be a better person. I love that the ending doesn't necessarily make any of their lives better, but the euphoria of that moment is enough to call it the happiest ending ever, which is kind of how you can describe every scene in the movie. When you're with your bros, is life really all that bad? Such a real, authentic experience. I cannot believe this is a real movie, and I cannot wait for the new one. Then I rewatched Before Sunrise. I should note that the last time I watched this, I was deep into the pandemic and extremely lonely, and watching this felt like getting a bucket of bricks dropped on my head. And this time, I found it to just be sweet and really good still. If anything, it proves that no matter where I am in life, this movie's magic of making me feel like I'm there with these two will always work. By the end of the movie, you feel that heartbreak and the frustrations. Such a special and sometimes cringy movie, but I do think it's all kind of on purpose. Richard Linklater is too self-aware of a writer to think that he's saying anything actually profound here. I think he's really just capturing this early 20s language really well. All that said, though, if Jesse didn't talk as much, I wouldn't have a problem with that. That's all I'm saying. Then I watched Logan Lucky. Why have none of you told me about this movie? This thing stars Channing Tatum, Adam Driver, and Daniel Craig, three of my favorite people working in Hollywood. I mean, it doesn't get much more charming than these fellas. And it's a heist movie directed by Steven Soderbergh, which is one of my favorite genres. I had a blast watching this. The heist itself is just as satisfying as Ocean's 11, even having the same upbeat kind of score set to it. The characters are just fascinating to watch. It doesn't have the same, I don't know, pizzazz that Ocean's 11 has. A lot of the humor in this feels almost too dry, but most of it works. I had such a fun time with it. There's not a lot else to say about it, but that's fine. Let's just move on. Then I watched Skinamarink. I decided to see this like 10 minutes before the showtime, knowing almost nothing about it, which made me extremely confused when I showed up and the theater was almost entirely sold out, and when I realized 20 minutes in that all I was watching was like ceilings in the dark, and when I realized most of the theater were like children. The point is, I didn't know this was like a TikTok thing until after the fact, and I'm still just so confused. The hype behind this movie is absolutely fascinating to me because really, this is what went viral. It's such a you either get it or you don't movie, because while I did admire its cinematic approach, I didn't find myself all that scared by anything. There's like 2 shots in here that are very unsettling, but other than that, I was just kind of like, oh, interesting, which is why it's such a hard film to review. If I was the type of person to get really freaked out by something like this, the ominous and frustratingly simple approach to its filmmaking would really work on me. It's kind of like how World's Fair really worked for me, but I can easily see it not working at all for someone else. I was sucked into this film, sure. I thought its approach was interesting, but I never felt in danger of anything going on. It left me pretty cold. That said, this is a typical case of can't wait to see what they do next, because this has such a unique approach, and it's clearly made by a very skilled filmmaker. Then I watched All Quiet on the Western Front. I thought this was good. With war movies these days, it feels like we've reached a point where it's very hard to shoot them in an interesting way that hasn't already been done before. And All Quiet does end up feeling like, well, we've already seen pretty much all of this before. Yet it still somehow comes out pretty strong, which I guess speaks to the quality of the film. There are scenes so early on that are just devastating, and you're like, well, it can't get any worse than that. And then, guys, it gets worse, which makes for a very intense watch. Definitely not a good time, but again, undeniably well made and well shot and good sound. It's everything you would expect. And that said, I just wish this was doing something a bit more special, I guess. I wish it would bring something new to the war film. Then I watched the first episode of The Last of Us. I'm counting this because it's basically a feature-length film. Speaking just on behalf of the first episode, this show rules. I am loving the attention to detail, the faithfulness yet fresh take on the game, and of course Pedro Pascal. The acting, cinematography, and score are all really well done. It's very thrilling. It just feels good to have like a good, terrifying zombie show after what feels like a drought of good zombie media. Besides The Dead Don't Die, I will continue to defend that movie. This thing is genuinely unsettling, and that's a great thing. I can't wait to watch more of it. No, don't ask me about episode 3. I haven't seen it yet. Then I went to Sundance, and none of these movies really have footage, so you're just gonna have to deal with a nice slideshow for a little bit. I watched Run Rabbit Run. This is a horror movie starring Sarah Snook that is in a way a really fucked up version of Alice in Wonderland, and I thought it was simply fine. It has a lot of the boring, empty tropes that a lot of contemporary horror films try to pull off and rarely do. This is not an exception. It definitely does not feel like it pulls any of this off. To be honest, I already forgot I watched this, but Sarah Snook was good. So there's that. And I watched Fairyland. This is about a bisexual dad living in 70s San Francisco with his daughter, and I have mixed feelings on it. Not in a way where it did anything provocative, if anything, the opposite. This started off very charming, cute, and sad, and just it slowly lost me as time went on. It just got more and more generic, which was disappointing considering how warm and unique the atmosphere started off. I will say though, Scoot McNairy delivers probably my favorite performance of the year so far. I'll hope to see him in some conversations later on. Then I watched Rye Lane, which was phenomenal. You should remember this because come March when this drops on Hulu, I just know you guys are gonna love it. I hope you guys are gonna love it. This is one of the funniest and most heartfelt and original romantic comedies we've had in years. The humor is just so consistently strange. The cinematography makes use of every pixel in the frame. There is an aggressive amount of attention being put towards the colors. I'm sure I'm going to be talking about this a lot more in the future, so I'll leave it there for now, but this is a really good movie. I like Bros, but it makes Bros look pretty pathetic. Then I watched Fancy Dance. This is a movie about an aunt and niece who set off to find their sister/mother. It is a very tense and at times dark movie, but the film is directed in such a patient and compelling way. Everything about the story is kind of predictable. You see where a lot of it is going, but the fact that it still remains so engrossing really speaks to just how well made it is and how much it gets you to care. Then I watched Bad Behavior, and this is a mess. This is about a pretty bad mom going to some retreat and then working through issues with her daughter. It's directed by Jane Campion's daughter, so technically it's about Jane Campion, and Jennifer Connelly is playing Jane Campion, and Jane Campion's also in the... What is going on? That seems like the simplest way to sum up a really jumbled and disorienting movie. Some of it is funny, but the dark humor at a certain point really gets in the way of the emotional core of the film that at times really needs to be taken seriously and just isn't. I just felt very disconnected watching this, and in the third act, when it desperately needed to be saved, things just went even more south. Then I watched Polite Society. This was fine. I have close to nothing to say about it. Well made and pretty stylish for an otherwise generic script. Not at all for me, but the younger crowd will probably really like it. Then I watched Cat Person. Personally, I had a really good time with this movie. I feel about the same as I did with Promising Young Woman. The politics and message behind the film are really bland and bring very little to the table, despite feeling like they're changing the game, which is, it's at this point gotten kind of eye-rolly. When the original New Yorker article dropped in 2017, it made a splash, but now it just feels kind of whatever. But the thriller aspects of this really make up for it and make it a pretty investing experience, even if it kind of falls on its face in the third act. Nicholas Braun and Amelia Jones are both really good in this. They play both these kinds of people perfectly and made their lack of chemistry work for the movie. Nothing about this has really stuck with me. It's honestly kind of gotten worse in my mind since seeing it. I think I was a little biased watching this at the world premiere, but that said, I had a pretty fun time watching it, and that's enough for me. Then I watched Infinity Pool. Already talked about this in a video. I loved it. It was the best thing I saw at the festival. It's so good. Then I watched Theater Camp, and I also loved it. As a fan of mockumentaries, this just hit it out of the park. I laughed at 90% of the jokes, which is a crazy amount of laughing to do in such a brief period of time. It's endlessly quotable and rewatchable. It deserves to be an instant classic in my opinion. It both makes fun of theater people while being the most theater person movie ever. It's very proud of what it is, and that gets through to the viewer. I just loved this, and I cannot wait to watch it over and over and over again. It's an instant classic for me. Then I watched Jamo Jaya. This is the latest from Justin Chon, starring Rich Brian of all people, and it was a little less than fine. It's about a successful rapper who decides to replace his manager, who also happens to be his father. An intriguing premise with tons of potential that the film does try to unpack, but it ultimately feels like it just repeats the same scene over and over again and doesn't really go anywhere. The dramatic beats didn't feel earned. It had a lot of weird dreamy sequences that felt like they were trying way too hard. It was shot like a music video, which is nice. Music videos look good, but I didn't feel anything the entire time. Then I watched Last Things. This is an experimental documentary about evolution and extinction through the perspective of rocks, and it was really, really cool. I do not know how to talk about it other than it was like the coolest way of learning science. So that's that. And I watched Landscape with Invisible Hand. This is the latest from Corey Finley, a director I've really enjoyed in the past, but this was just plain boring. The humor in this is incredibly dry, something I'm almost always on board with, but it never worked once in this movie. All the alien sci-fi stuff just felt really half-assed and not at all interesting. Everything about it was also kind of awkward, and like it never really jumped fully off the page. None of the actors really seemed like they were committed at all to the material. It's just a bore, kind of. I don't know. I was really disappointed. While I was at Sundance, I caught Waiting for the Light to Change. This is directed by my good friend Ling Tran, and I'm not just saying this because I know most of the people who worked on this, but I loved this movie. The slow yet inviting style puts the viewer in such a spell. The film does an excellent job at creating a space for characters to exist in so freely, and also for the viewer to comfortably sit in on, giving you this feeling like you're a part of every conversation. Beautifully captures the fluidity of being in your early 20s and the frustrations that come with feeling stuck in an undefinable part of your life, waiting for something to change, waiting for the light to change. It's a beautiful movie that I'm sure most of you would really love, and I'm very proud of everybody I know that worked on this. I also watched a 4K restoration of Gregor Araki's The Doom Generation. What does it say that the film I thought most about from Sundance is the one that came out in the 90s? I expected to not really vibe with this one, even as a diehard Araki fan. I've only heard mixed things about it, but maybe it's the restoration, maybe it was the crowd, but I thought this was fantastic. It brought everything I usually love about his work: the strange, surreal humor, the one-of-a-kind production design, the perfect dialogue. I love the fact that in the Q&A he described it as the gayest heterosexual movie ever, and it's got probably the most shocking ending he's ever made, and one of the most shocking endings I've ever seen, period. I really admire his approach to filmmaking. We need more filmmakers like Gregor Araki, but I know that's asking a lot at this point. His bold approach has really not missed once with me. It hasn't. Then I finished the month with Amsterdam. I went in with an open mind because as much as I despise David O. Russell, I thought based on the cast and premise that this could be at the very least an entertaining time on the plane. But no, it is just plain boring and mostly incoherent. I hate this movie. The blocking is horrendous. The editing feels like an accident most of the time. The actors feel like they are all in different rooms in different movies. The cinematography is kind of nice most of the time. That's the one redeemable quality, but it sucks that it's colored in the ugliest way imaginable. All love the Taylor Swift. Her getting hit by a car was really funny. I can at least appreciate it being unique for what it is, but it really felt like it made one wrong decision after another. Oh my god, it was so much worse than I thought it was gonna be. And hey, that's what I watched this month. This cold really sucks, so I'm gonna go lay down. But thanks for watching. Go watch all these films and form your own opinion. And before you head out, Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, and incredible cinema. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected, so it's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. See, that's what I love about Mubi so much, is that every night when I'm trying to figure out something to watch and I get overwhelmed by how many choices there are out there, Mubi is there to show me some hand-selected cinema that I know is worth something because someone thought it was worth putting on Mubi. And that's it's nothing like having someone else tell you what to watch, which is why you guys are watching this video, I'm pretty sure. You can try Mubi free for 30 days at mubi.com/Karsten. That's mubi.com/Karsten for a whole month of amazing cinema for free.